Woman in Gold is a BBC Films production starring Helen Mirren and Ryan Reynolds as the lead roles in the true story of an Austrian Jewish woman trying to get back her paintings stolen by the Nazis with the help of an Austrian-American lawyer. We are first introduced to Maria Altmann, a Jewish refugee who fled Nazi-occupied Austria during the early days of World War II. Maria is burying her sister, whose death introduces us to the entire reason for the film. As it turns out, Maria's sister had some contacts with others in Austria post-World War II in regards to their possessions that were stolen by the Nazis, the most important of which being the iconic Gustav Klimt painting Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer. While I may have never heard of the painting before, it is apparently rather famous and important, as we all find out through the duration of the film. But what is more important is that this Adele Bloch-Bauer is the aunt of Maria Altmann. Maria, now living in 1990s Los Angeles, is in need of a lawyer, and what better choice than the grandson of some of her close friends back in Austria. Randall Schoenberg is a lawyer with little experience, but is of an elite pedigree, a fact that the movie reminds us just a few too many times for it to seem natural. We see Randall hastily preparing himself for an interview for a big law firm as his attempts to start his own firm fell flat on its face. Ryan Reynolds does well in channeling the gamut of emotions Randall goes through, from jittery nervousness to courtroom stoicism. Maria seems undeterred by the fact that Randall has no experience in art restitution law, and in fact, Randall mostly brushes off Maria at first, as he is concerned with making a good impression on his new employers. All of this changes, however, when Randall dials up on the interwebs and finds out that the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer is worth millions of dollars. Asking for the law firm's blessing, Randall convinces Maria to come back to Vienna in an attempt to get the painting back. It needs to be said that there are many flashbacks to Maria's past in Vienna, and it is these flashbacks that flavor and contain the emotional heft of the story, showing her life before, during, and fleeing the Nazi occupation of Vienna. They are great and emotional scenes that contain thought-provoking and tension-filled viewing. It needs to be noted that nothing we the viewer witness in the scenes of the movie's present has any meaning if we have not first been shown what has already transpired. The past contains the fiber that weave the present into an enjoyable and watchable narrative. Maria at first refuses to go to Vienna. The last time she was there, it was firmly controlled by the Nazis. While the dehumanization of the Jews is shown throughout the film in poignant flashbacks, I believe what really bothers Maria is that the Austrian public greeted the Nazis with open arms, that they were so blind to what the Nazis really were, that they would be beguiled so easily by hateful rhetoric. I glean this from my viewing of the film, but this is something that is not stated nor necessarily hinted at, and the film chooses to ignore this facet to stick with facts that are more well known. Back in the movie's present, the Austrian government, understandably, are unwilling to let go of the painting as they feel it is a part of their national identity. Part of this national identity, however, is the whitewashing of its past, when the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer was renamed to The Woman in Gold so as to hide her Jewish heritage by the Nazis. However, the government does have a claim on the painting, as it possesses a will from Adele, who wanted it to be given to the art gallery of Belvedere upon her death. It is here that we are introduced to the last really important character of the film, Hubertus Cernin, an Austrian journalist who sees Maria getting her painting as a way to right the wrongs of a dark past of Austrian history. Hubertus is played wonderfully by Daniel Brühl, who is probably best known for his role as the villain in Captain America: Civil War. Brühl's performance lights up the screen for the few scenes he is in, and you invest in his character so quickly even though you have only seen him a handful of times. Hubertus has a mole in the Belvedere, and he uses that connection to give Randall and Maria a chance to dig up what they can to get the painting back. What they find is that the painting was to be given to the Belvedere after Adele's husband had died. The only problem for the Belvedere is that Adele died before her husband, and her husband wrote his own will giving his possessions to his nieces, who were Maria and her sister. Also, Maria's uncle was the one who paid for Klimt for the painting, and thus he would technically be the owner. Randall files a challenge with the Art Restitution Board, but even with all the evidence, the challenge is denied. Also, according to Austrian law, you have to put up a portion of the total worth of the art, kind of like collateral or a bond, in order to challenge the board's decision. And since the woman in gold is worth millions of dollars, finding this sort of money would be impossible for an almost broke lawyer and an elderly small business owner. Now defeated, Randall and Maria return to America. Maria has resigned herself to living out the rest of her days working in her boutique, but something has happened to Randall, something he himself cannot explain. Even though he has a successful job, a loving wife, and a newborn, there is something missing from Randall. What it is, the movie never explicitly goes into. Maybe it was a sudden sense of purpose he got by investigating the painting. Maybe it was his sense of justice. The audience is just left to wonder. But I think that's perfectly okay, as this reflects many motivations people have in their own lives. And sometimes we just can't completely explain them all. The movie does a great job of showing the rising tension in Randall. He goes about his days doing his job, but he stays up late doing further research, trying to find a way to get the painting back. Randall begins to look disheveled, and his relationship with his wife becomes strained, especially when Randall decides to quit his job in order to pursue a surprise avenue to summon the Austrian government to court. Randall essentially tricks Maria into suing Austria, but Maria ultimately goes along as she truly wants to get her paintings back. The movie then sort of shifts to a courtroom drama, and the scenes are done very well as the tension continues to rise, and the film shows off Randall's nervousness, especially in the Supreme Court scene. You feel every victory and the nervous butterflies before every verdict. And while things are going well, the story takes a turn when Randall and Maria try to mediate with the Austrian government. Austria refuses any of the terms given to them by Randall or Maria to keep the painting in the Belvedere, as they, quote, will not pay for something that we believe is rightfully ours. Nor will they admit to obtaining the painting illegally. Randall agrees to arbitration in Vienna, but Maria is having none of it. She will not go back to Vienna. She has been so deeply impacted by the humiliation and betrayal of her countrymen that she refuses to speak German and routinely uses the cold Stoic term of the Austrians whenever she refers to the people of her former homeland. Maria has created a mental canyon between herself and everything that associated her with Austria. This movie shows to what extent we can mentally take ourselves to in order to forget and reforge ourselves. Even if Maria regains the painting, she has intentionally lost a part of her she can never get back. Randall, now solo, meets with Hubertus in Vienna before presenting his case before the Austrian court, and Hubertus shares his doubts about their success, as he believes that Austria has not truly changed. Boosted by the sudden appearance of Maria, Randall gives a stirring speech to the Austrian arbitrators about the past wrongs done and about setting things right. When we all know by this time what the verdict is going to be, it still filled me with warmth to hear the court siding with Maria and giving the paintings back to her. We are left with an emotional ending, with Maria seeming to come to peace with her life. She visits the house she once lived in, now converted into an office building. Buoyed by splendid music composed at the hands of Hans Zimmer and Martin Phipps, we find the present-day Maria in a flashback to her past of happier times. It was the perfect way to end the film. Woman in Gold is an all-around solid movie with performances from Marion Reynolds and Bruhl that do justice to the real-life counterparts they portrayed. The rest of the cast was also solid, and the movie was well-paced. To be frank, I feel the perception of the movie to be dull is a misplaced sentiment upon an inherently slower-paced movie. While that is my assessment of the movie, there are a few things that I believe need to be addressed concerning the perception and the historical accuracy of the film. Some viewers have been left with the feeling that the movie tried to make the Austrians out to be the villains, and that the movie didn't do enough to show the emotional impact the removal of the portrait of Adele had upon Austria. Some have also tried to paint Maria as the villain for ripping out a cultural core of Austria by using her familial link to the painting. And when she finally gains possession of that painting, she goes and sells it. While I could understand some feeling this way, I think the movie does a great job of showing that the reason Austria is so bullish about keeping the painting is because it does mean that much to them. It has become a part of their cultural identity. And while the grief of its removal from Austria is really only shown by one character, you, the viewer, must realize that how Austria procured this treasure was by immoral and illicit means. But Austria only paid the penalty for their actions by refusing to recognize the wrong that had been done. They had the chance to admit their faults, but instead they decided to hold on to their pride, and they paid dearly for their fall. There is a lesson in that for ourselves and for our country if we care to pay attention to it. One major historical discrepancy that must be brought up is that it was Hubertus who researched and initiated the restitution case for the painting and not Randall as the movie depicts. While this was probably done to keep the movie focused upon the two main characters, it robs the historical Hubertus Cernin and his family of the even more important role he played in this story. The other discrepancy also deals with Hubertus, concerning his motivation for atoning for his father's sins, as his father was a Nazi. In reality, Hubertus didn't learn of his father being a Nazi until a few years after the restitution case. Obviously, the film changes this to heighten the emotional impact and tension for one of its characters, but in light of the facts, it cheapens Hubertus' reason for helping Maria. While these discrepancies don't hurt the viewing experience in any way, it hurts Hubertus and the other Austrians involved in this momentous event in their country's history. They should have been allowed the time to shine in the film as they did in real life. And perhaps, maybe the film would have been even better if we had seen the story as it truly was. You can still fully enjoy Woman in Gold while knowing this, but you can't help but wonder what might have been. And that is something no movie should put the viewer in the position of thinking. So, what was your take on Woman in Gold? Did you watch it? Did you like my reviews? Or am I just making nonsense? Either way, like, comment, or subscribe. I appreciate it all. I thank you for all your support. This is the OutcastWriter signing off, and until next review, just remember, what we create matters.